Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning and welcome to the bill signing of recently passed legislation, House Bills 1022 and Senate Bill 127, and of course the following town hall. I'm getting some kind of strange deja vu this morning. I'm not quite sure why that is, but I'll shake it off. It is my distinct honor and privilege this morning to introduce our governor. When she and I discussed the Secretary of Education position a bit less than a year and a half ago, she was good enough to provide me with her vision of what she wanted for South Dakota's children. She wanted an instructional program in which 100% of students are proficient or above in reading, English, and mathematics, and a return to evidence-based instructional methods which can make that happen. She wanted a state educational program which respected the achievements of American history and Western civilization, while squarely facing its challenges and its failures, and taught the same to those who will soon inherit the great American experiment. She wanted schools which were respectful of the desires and opinions of parents from every background, with every worldview, from every socioeconomic level of any and all ethnicities. And she wanted an educational system which provides those parents with the educational opportunities with the priority on what they choose, not just what they are offered. She wanted a bolstering of the ranks of our teachers, those who make schools work and help students learn, especially in the face of the continuing teacher shortage. She wanted a resurrection where it was needed and a continuation where it already exists of a climate of respect and appreciation of our teachers, including the assurance that they receive the full measure of compensation that the state and their local school districts can provide. She wanted a movement away from the worst excesses of the climate created by the pandemic, of school attendance as optional, of hard work shunned, of students who think more about feelings than thought, and towards one of resilience, commitment, and achievement. The two bills that she will sign today are critical parts to fulfilling that vision, and it has been an honor to serve this vision and this governor. This farmer, rancher, small business owner, this New York Times best-selling author, this former legislator who served both in the South Dakota General Assembly and the United States House of Representatives. This 2018 gubernatorial candidate who was elected South Dakota's first ever female governor. This 2022 gubernatorial candidate who was reelected with the largest vote total in the history of our state. This governor who kept the schools open for 2 straight years when so many states closed them tight. This governor who kept our state open for business, trusting South Dakota.
Came to peer as your legislators, passed a responsible budget that took and made discerning and wise decisions with taxpayer money to spend it in ways that would benefit not just this year, but also the next fiscal year, but also our kids and our grandkids for generations to come. That really is our goal each and every day, is to make sure that we're having an impact going forward to do what is best for South Dakota in the long term. Most people don't really recognize that South Dakota is the very first state in the country that goes into legislative session every single year. We also are the first state to go out of legislative session first every single year. That means that we set the example for the rest of the country. When someone proposes a bill or an idea in South Dakota, other states are watching us to see what the debate is, what the discussion is, how the committee hearings go, what the facts are that comes forward, and what is true and what is not true. And then they use that when they go to their states to run similar bills or to kill similar bills or to use it to make their states better or to build on what we do. So what happens here in South Dakota matters not just for us and for our future, but it matters for the rest of the country because they're watching us, and if we set a good example, we know that others will follow. Today we have an exciting opportunity for us to sign 2 bills into law that I'm extremely passionate about. And most of you don't know a lot about my history. You hear some of the things that Secretary Graves shared with you, and that's kind of public knowledge. What maybe most of you don't know is that I grew up on a farm and a ranch, but when I went to college to be a teacher. That I wanted to spend my life in the classroom with kids because I loved kids. I was an education major for 2 years before my dad was killed in an accident, and everything kind of changed. I ended up with a political science degree about 15 years later, with running a lot of different businesses and doing things, but consistently spent my time with kids, being a 4-H leader, being a Sunday school teacher, being a kids pastor at our church, just doing everything that I could, investing in children because I love them, and think that we can learn a lot from them, and they truly are the ones that will make sure that our lives, when we die, we can say that our lives, we lived one with significance, that we left a legacy behind us. So to be here in this school district is incredibly special for me. It's special for me because of Secretary Graves. I'm super impressed by his leadership and by his insight and his wisdom. He never comes to the table with emotions or thoughts. He comes with facts and statistics and ideas, and he's a visionary. That makes a big difference when you're really working on policy and what it means to education. He cares about parents and family having a say into their kids' educations. He cares about making sure that we have standards that ensure that our kids, they can get the best education in the world, but that when they were done with that they still love America, and that they still realize the gift that we've been given by living in this country. And that just by waking up here this morning, that we're more blessed than 99% of the people in the world just because we woke up here in the United States of America. So he's been a special gift that I am very grateful that you all have contributed him to me and let me take and use his wisdom. We also have many other special guests here today that I want to give them the chance to say something as well. The first one is my lieutenant governor. When I first ran for governor, the question was asked of me, when I received the nomination, who I would choose to run as my partner, as my running mate. And I was advised to choose, because I was a farmer and a rancher, a businessman from Sioux Falls. So instead I chose a rancher from West River. And the reason that I decided to run with Larry Roden is because I trusted his instincts, his values. He loved the Lord, he loved his family, and I knew if I got killed the next day, he'd run this state exactly how I would. And that was important to me. I'd like to invite Larry to come up here and have you all greet him and let him share a few thoughts with you before we move on to the signing ceremony of these two pieces of legislation. Let's welcome him.
Well, thank you, Governor, for the introduction. I'll be really brief. I will just say this. It's a privilege to be here. And I look in the back of the room, the number of legislators that are here. We just got through session, and I think getting around the state like this, I think was a great idea to get out and meet people, especially this year after this session. We do a lot of things right in South Dakota and the way we administer government. I was in the legislature 16 years, and so I belong to some national organizations. And the more I've learned about other state governments, the more I've become more and more convinced that South Dakota has it right. Citizen legislators that are there for a short period of time and then go home and live with the laws that they passed that year, and then come back next year and fix what they got wrong. Not that they ever get anything wrong. But we've, in the last 20 years, we've ebbed and flowed as far as the functionality of our state government, especially in the shadow of term limits. I will say this, we had a better session this year, just process-wise, than we've had in a number of years. It reminded me of the old days when, the Senate and the House were working together, pulling in the same harness to come up with their agenda, and then later in session working with the second floor, the governor's office, to marry those proposals. 105 legislators in the governor's office working in the same harness to serve the people of South Dakota. And this year they got it right in a lot of ways. And so and we accomplished some great things. And we're here to celebrate a couple of those accomplishments. So thank you, Governor. Thank you all for being here.
So I'd like to invite all the legislators to come up here to the front, if you would. Come be with us, Mike and Tony and all you guys, Jim, Jessica. Today we're going to sign two bills into law, two education bills. One of them deals with literacy. Across the country, literacy is declining among our kids. We all know our kids can't be successful if they don't know how to read, if they don't have the ability to go forward and to pursue a career or an opportunity, if they can't use those skill sets that they need to be successful doing so. We also have another one that dealt with teacher salaries. For years we've talked about how teacher salaries in this state needed to be increased and that we needed to invest more in the classrooms closest to our kids. A little bit of history on that is that when I was elected to the legislature in 2006, I recognized that I wanted to make a difference for our teachers. My family is filled with teachers. I have 4 sisters in-laws that are teachers. I have an uncle that's an administrator, another uncle that's a teacher. I have 3 nieces and nephews that are teachers that work in classrooms. The vast majority of my family members are in South Dakota in our classrooms, and I wasn't doing this for them. It was just meant that every time I went to Christmas dinner, I also heard about how low our teachers' salaries were. But in 2008, I brought a bill that would have developed and brought forward a minimum teacher salary. That's not the bill that we're signing into law today, but I do think it started the conversation. And sometimes starting a conversation years ago is okay, because it normalizes the fact that you need good policy, that the right ideas are great, but some of these legislators up here really took the time and invested their effort into making sure that this was a policy that was going to make sure that our school districts had the opportunity to really make a difference in the amount of salaries that we can pay our teachers, and that they can stay in their communities where they want to be and have the best and the brightest come out of our school districts that will continue to lead this state far into the future and into success. So I want to start with Tony and let Tony share a few words, because Tony Van Huysen is standing up here. He was one of the champions of this bill that had to do with teacher salaries and raising that and some accountability within school districts. But Tony was my chief of staff. He was also Governor Dugard's chief of staff. He also worked for Governor Rounds, and I think maybe before that, maybe you were an intern even for Governor Janklow at one time? Rounds, that's when you were an intern. Well, he's not as old as I thought. All right. All right. No, I could have been meaner, but that was very kind there. So, but why don't we have Tony share a few thoughts, and if any of the others of you have something that you want to share about these 2 bills in specific that we'll sign into law, we'll do those and sign those into law. Then we'll open it up to a town hall and see if you guys want to stick around for that and answer some questions if you want to, or else you can just let me do that too, and I'll do my very best. So Tony, would you want to share a few words?
Well, thank you, and that's not the first time the governor's invited me to speak without any warning.
Yes, you're right.
So excuse me for that. You know, there are a couple things we know about what it takes to be successful in education, and we're addressing both of those today. One of them is you can't learn if you can't read. It's the very threshold thing. If our young people can't read, they can't do anything else. And so the first bill that we're talking about today goes back in, puts funding in to make sure that our teachers are trained to teach reading in the best way possible, that the systems are in place so that we're doing the best job we can to teach our young people to read. Again, if we don't have that, we don't have anything. Secondly, we know every research study tells you the number one in-school factor for effective education is not facilities, it's not spending, it's not class size, it's having a quality teacher in the classroom. That's number one. Well, if you want to have quality teachers enter the workforce and stay in the workforce, you have to pay them. And so the second bill that we're talking about today that I'm very proud of, and I really appreciate the governor's leadership on helping get this through, is going to say, look, when the state puts money into the schools, we want to see that money get into the teachers' pockets. This year we did a 4% increase for schools. We want to see the teachers get a 4% increase. It's that simple. And secondly, we're going to set a minimum salary to say, you know, if you're teaching in this state, you should make at least $45,000 a year. That number will go up every year by the inflationary number too. But we need to be prioritizing teacher salaries. We know it's the best way to succeed in the classroom. And so I'm very proud of this bill. I'm very happy that you supported it and those of the rest of us here supported it. So excited to see it get signed. Thank you, Governor.
Thank you. Would each of you introduce yourselves, say your legislative district, share a quick thought if you want to?
Sure. My name is Mike Stevens. I'm from District 18, which is Yankton and part of Clay County.
Representative Ben Cromer from right here in Mitchell. I graduated from Mitchell High School, so it's good to be here as well.
Excuse me.
Oh, sorry.
State Senator Jim Bolin. I represent a little bit of southeastern South Dakota, rural Lincoln, rural Turner, and the northern portion of Union County. Been in the legislature for 16 years. This will be my last session, and I'm really glad that I could be involved in getting this bill passed. Very proud of it, and I'm confident that it will attract more people into education. My mom was a teacher, started south of Yankton down by York, Nebraska many years ago. My dad was a teacher, and I was a career teacher too, so I'm really proud of this bill. Thank you.
Representative Jessica Baumiller, representing District 19, which is Hanson County, Hutchinson County, Bon Homme County, and a small portion of Turner County. I also went to school to be a teacher and do not teach, so I'm very proud of these bills. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Senator Jack Kobeck. I'm from District 13 out of Sioux Falls. I was born and raised in Salem, not very far east of here. And all 12 of my siblings, including myself, were born right here in Mitchell at the St. Joe's Hospital, and all births were performed by the same doctor. And he actually told my mom when the 12th one was born, he says, "This one's on me." So we got that. My mom was also a teacher. She started out in a little country school way back over there by the Bridgewater, Salem area. And I'm so proud to be a part of the Appropriations Committee and this legislature that worked so hard to get this legislation passed. And I really want to thank our governor for really taking a foothold in this. And I think it's going to be great for education and definitely for our teachers in the state of South Dakota. Thanks for all coming. Thank you.
Representative Lance Toth. I'm from Mitchell. I serve Davison, Sanborn, and Gerald, and a small piece of Minor County, just a little sliver. And I also am very proud of what the legislature was able to accomplish this year. I would just like to do a shout out to the leadership, both the governor's office, and the Senate and the House. In my 6 years in serving in the legislature, I've never ever seen them work so well together and accomplish what I consider to be very meaningful legislation. And I'll just share this. Oftentimes in the past, we would gavel out late into the night to try to balance the budget. This year, it was 1:00 p.m. in the afternoon. And that's a testament to what good leadership can do. Very proud. It's probably will go down as my most favorite year. So thank you all that are in leadership. I appreciate it. And thanks for letting me serve.
Hi everyone, my name is Josh Klum. I serve as your senator right here in Mitchell, District 20. While I am not a teacher, I'm a farmer. My mother was a teacher here in the Mitchell School District for many years. My wife currently is a teacher in this school district as well. So these bills have meaning to me and my family. I do want to also thank the governor for coming here today, for championing these bills, and for the legislature for pushing them through. I really can't say I had a huge part of it. I voted for them, and that was about as much as I did on it. But they are important bills for the future of education in this state. So thank you all for coming, and also I haven't termed out. I won't be running again. I've served my full 10 years in the legislature, so now I'll be retiring and doing something else. But thank you all for being here today. Raising my daughter, right?
Okay, so this is how it's going to work. You're all going to stay up here with me. Sorry, Kelloland. Not me.
Good catch.
Maybe I did need to do that.
Now we did it.
Yes. Tony, shh. So we are going to also invite Secretary Graves to come up. I think if we want to have any teachers or superintendents come and be a part of the signing ceremony, be a part of the picture, I think that'd be absolutely fantastic. If some of the students want to, that'd be amazing. I would love that. What we will do is we will move over to the table. I will read the bills and the titles out loud. We will take some pictures. We will sign them into law. And then we will go forward and we'll start our town hall, if that is okay for all of you to do that. Sound like a plan? Yeah. Are you on board? Yeah. All right, we'll do that. We'll move this direction.
Bring Max.
Yeah, if you've got little kiddos you want to bring up here too. It's all about them. It's not about us.
You got a lot to do. Oh yeah.
I don't
Get some of the kids over on the other side as well. Run out.
Ava, let's go over there. Mr. Morgan. I'm sure. It's okay.
Do we have everybody? You guys come on up here. Come right in here by my chair. It's not so boring. It's way more fun if you're in here.
Too short. Sorry.
So what we're going to do first of all is we're going to look straight forward at Ben. Ben has this big camera, and we're going to look at him and we're going to smile and take a picture. 1, 2, 3.
Go one more here on the cell phone. Thank you.
Next instructions will be is that I'm going to pretend that I'm signing this bill, and we're all going to look down like you're watching me sign it, and it's all for pretend. I'm not gonna, but he's going to get a really great picture out of it. So here we go. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Pretend. We got it?
Yeah.
All right. This is the real deal. Today, we are signing into law House Bill 1022. This is an act that is entitled to make an appropriation to the Department of Education to provide professional development in literacy to teachers and to declare an emergency. Signed by me, Governor Kristi Noem, the 13th day of March. And the fact that it's an emergency means that we're just going to spend the money right away. That's the only reason it's an emergency. Sound good? Congratulations, everybody. We'll find other pens for you legislators. All right. The next bill, we are going to do the exact same thing. So we're going to look at Ben. We smile. 1, 2, 3. Can you take one of the big camera? We're going to pretend. 1, 2, 3. Pretend. Good job. And this is Senate Bill 127. It's an act to revise the requirements pertaining to average teacher compensation and to establish a minimum teacher's salary. Signed by me, Governor Kristi Noem, March 13th. And congratulations. That's fantastic. Do you want that one? Yeah. Tony, I'll get you one wherever you are. You got a lot of pens? All right. Well, congratulations. Thank you, everybody. Those are officially law right now. So you guys like literally just changed the state law. How cool is that? Right? To pay your teachers more. Maybe they'll give you an extra recess today. All right. All right. Everybody can go and have a seat if you'd like to. If the legislators would like to stay a little closer to the front in case you get a question that I would
fight for that. Yeah.
I never hear you. Whack, whack.
For those pins. Gotta get squat down like I'm I had that pen, it would be on a little stand in my room.
Okay, we're going to get started. Just the reason that I wanted to have a town hall was just to answer any questions that the community may have of things that happen during legislative session. Most of you know what the South Dakota Constitution requires of a legislative session and requires of the role of the governor and the legislature and the executive branch. I, as governor, propose a budget in December. I give a budget speech, which most of you probably heard about what my priorities would be, and then propose that to the legislature. When they go into session at the beginning of January, then they work off of that budget and have all the freedom in the world to make amendments and proposals, to pass bills and bring them forward. And then we have debate, and in less than 40 days, they all do that, and then they go home. And we this year, during legislative session, when I brought forward my budget, recognized that this was going to be the first time in the last several years that we probably were going to have a more normal budget cycle. Most of you know that since I've become your governor in 2019, things have been a little bit different. I don't think it was my fault. But if I remember when I first was sworn in 2019, within weeks we got hit with a bomb cyclone, if you remember that. This part of the state was hit very hard. During that year, 63 of our 66 counties were declared federal disaster areas. because of the amount of snow and moisture that we got on frozen ground. And we spent all of 2019 basically doing FEMA requests, putting communities back together, fixing water treatment plants, building roads and bridges. And it was such a very different, interesting year. And I thought for sure that when we got to 2020 that it was going to be so much better. And then we got COVID, and things changed dramatically, if you remember what the country was going through. We in South Dakota made very different decisions than other states did. I think we benefited from some of those decisions. We kept our businesses open. We invited people to come be a part of our way of life. We promoted our tourism industry. We also went out there and talked about the opportunity to bring a business here, and that if people wanted to come and live somewhere where we respected law enforcement officers, that we would love that if they would come here and be safe, and that we were a state that believed in upholding the law and safe communities and taking care of your neighbors. Would you guys all give a round of applause for all the law enforcement officers? An incredible amount of them. Now, because of that, we have had historic revenues come into the state. We have broken records for the amount of money that's come into the state. Yes, we've had federal dollars that came through programs, but also our economy has done better. Incomes have gone up in the state of South Dakota because of some of the decisions that we've made. We've recruited new industries to our state. We have paid off our debts and helped our universities and our technical schools pay off their bonds early before they were required to be paid off because of those revenues. We've broken records in the amount of hunting licenses sold and fishing licenses sold because we promoted our outdoors. We've had women-owned businesses do better here than they have in other states. We've been one of the very few states in the country that actually we had mental health challenges decline. We had some suicide rates decline. And that we have also, 2 out of the last 3 years, been the only state in the country where overdoses have gone down. And I think that's because people in South Dakota recognize that by embracing personal responsibility and by letting them make more decisions for their families, that they felt more freedom, they were happier, and they had the ability to make the right decisions and the flexibility to do what they needed to do, what was right, and what made it work. And that is what is so incredibly special about South Dakota. Now, during this legislative session, when I brought forward my budget, I brought forward a proposal to recognize that because a lot of federal dollars were going away, because it was going to be a very different and normal budget year, much like when I served in the legislature, that I really needed to set the tone for what the priorities of state government are. I am just simply not one of those people who thinks that the government is always the right answer for everything. I just believe that a lot of times people ask the government to do things for them, that maybe there's somebody else who should be doing that for them instead. Maybe it's their family, maybe it's the community, maybe it's a nonprofit, maybe it's their church. What does the Constitution say that the job is of the government? Now, I made 2 promises when I became governor of South Dakota. And I got a little bit overwhelmed the day that I was sworn in. Because I remember the first day that I was sworn in as governor, I hadn't thought about it all that much, but when I got to that ceremony, they kept talking about how historic it was. About how historic it was, not just that we were electing our first female governor, which I hadn't really thought was that big of a deal, but the fact that it was on the anniversary of the 100th year that women had first gotten the right to vote in the state of South Dakota. So the fact that we were getting our first female governor on the 100th anniversary of women getting the right to vote, I thought, oh my goodness, this is kind of a big deal. And I realized I better not screw it up because people were going to be paying attention. And the 2 promises that I made that day when I was sworn in was that I would uphold the state of Constitution, the Constitution of the state of South Dakota, and that I would uphold the Constitution of the United States of America. I can do that. 2 promises. How hard could that be, right? So from that point forward, that's how every single decision has been made in my office. You guys maybe don't know this because I don't think I've had a town hall here and really explained to you that every single bill that comes forward in the governor's office has to go through a bill analysis. I've got staff members here. Would you all just stand if you work for me in the governor's office? Because if you have a problem with anything that you want to discuss today that you don't want to talk about in front of other people, you can find any of these staff members. Where's Ryan at? Oh, here we go. Okay, Ryan and Brad over here as well. But if you want to talk to them about something that you need us to address that's specific, you maybe don't want to bring up in front of everybody, all these folks work in the governor's office with me. And I brought them with me so they could hear directly from you too. You can sit down now, that's fine. But what they do for me is that they do a bill analysis on every single bill that gets proposed. That means if it's an idea that we're going to bring forward, or if it's an idea that a legislator is going to bring forward and file as a bill, they have to answer these questions for me. The first question is, what happens if this bill becomes law? What are the consequences of that? The second one is, what happens if this bill doesn't become law? It goes through what happens, what is the precedent that it sets up? But the very last question on that form says, what happens to the next generation if this bill becomes law? Which means I don't want people thinking about what happens in 6 months from now. If this is a good political issue, if this is a good thing to talk about, how does it impact November? I don't want that kind of a discussion in my office. What I want is what happens 10 years from now if we sign this bill into law. And what does that open the door to, and what are the consequences of it if we go forward and do that? And so when my staff brings an idea to me or a bill that a legislator wants to do, they've gone through all of that. And then we sit around a table and we debate them all and talk about them and do more research and look into the legal side of it and spend a lot of time on it. So just so that you know that if something got talked about this legislative session, the legislators had their committee hearings and they had their discussions and their research and their debate. The governor's office does a completely separate operation on it. We do our own analysis and debate because we are a different branch of government. We're to be a check and balance to them. They're to be a check and balance to us. The judicial system is to be a check and balance on us. And in South Dakota, it works very well because everybody has integrity. We talk to each other and we have debate in an open, transparent process that I think is incredibly important. What I brought forward and for discussion this legislative session was that I wanted our legislators to remember, because a lot of them were new and hadn't been through a normal budget year where there wasn't a lot of excess federal funds, what the responsibilities of state government is. The responsibilities of state government, we have big three things that are really, really important that we are responsible for. One of them is for providers, people who take care of those who need help. Maybe they're developmentally disabled, maybe they're in nursing homes or assisted livings, maybe they do some kind of service for those. We call them CSPs, community support providers. Those folks are a responsibility to be reimbursed by the state of South Dakota for taking care of people that are in disadvantaged situations or in situations where they need help. We also have a responsibility to take care of education. The Constitution says that we are responsible for K-12 education and that we need to do that in a fair way that is done correctly to make sure that every child has access to an education that is of high quality. And the third one is state employees. We have to run this state, and we have people that work for this state. And so the big three is always a big topic of conversation. And since I've been governor, I've always recommended increases. I've always recommended that we get more efficient. We may have less state employees than we've had before, but we're also making sure that they're being compensated well, that we're competing with private industries for them. And in fact, this state budget that we just passed cut over $70 million worth of spending, which means we're being more efficient with your money, that we're being smart and saving taxpayer money, but we're still continuing to fund increases in education and providers and state employees because it's necessary to do the right thing and make sure that we're equipped properly to go forward. We've had in education almost 28% increase since I've been governor in funding to education. And that's why you see bills like you saw today, to make sure that not only are we just giving more money to education, but that we've also got more money that's getting into the classroom, into teachers that can really continue to invest into our kids. Those were big priorities for me. A lot of people said, how come you didn't bring a ton of bills this year, Governor? You just didn't have as many bills as you normally do. And it was because the budget was my priority this year. I wanted to make sure that the budget and how that we spent our money wisely was important, and that we had a conversation with legislators on where government money should go at the state level and where it should not go. A couple of bills I'll just mention. I cared a lot about the fact that I didn't want China owning our land. I just think that's stupid. They hate us. They want to destroy us. I've spent 30 years now working on ag policy and on food policy. I started when I was about 22, 23 years old, and I got a lot of decades of watching China buy up our food supply. They were buying our fertilizer companies decades ago, our chemical companies. They own almost all of our processing systems. They steal our intellectual property. Just this summer, we had Chinese spies in South Dakota trying to steal our genetics on how we grow our crops and how they could use it, and the State Department warned them off of our land and told us not to meet with them because they were here to take something from us on how to grow our food better than us so they could drive us out of business. They also manipulate their currency And now they're in this country buying up our land. And when a country controls our food supply, they will control us. The thing that is incredible to me is that China will put their people through inhumane things for hundreds and hundreds of years to become the world power. I'm not even certain if America is willing to be inconvenienced anymore for that. And if we think a pandemic was scary, wait until you go to the grocery stores and you can't get food because we let China buy up everything that controls our food supply. So for me, ag policy, farmers and ranchers, that was a decision America made years and years ago to have a farm bill and to have a safety net to make sure that we always have a safe and an affordable food supply here in this country that we grow ourselves. That's why you have a farm bill, is so you have a safety net. That it makes sure that we will always have farmers here, we will always grow our own food, and that we won't have one good year where they pay their bills and then have one bad year where they all go out of business and then we can't continue to feed ourselves. So that bill that we passed and signed into law to make sure that countries that hate us can't buy our ag land is incredibly important. The other thing that you should know is that we have Ellsworth Air Force Base in South Dakota. And Ellsworth is a home to the B-21 bomber. It has protected our country for the last 50 years. It was the #1 bombing platform, and when you heard about those strikes in the Middle East just a few weeks ago, those were our bombers. Those were our pilots and our airmen that conducted those strikes to do that. We have the MQ-9 Reaper drones that are operated out of there, but Ellsworth is also going to be the home of the B-21 bombers, which is the next generation bomber that will protect the country for the next 50 years. They strategically chose Ellsworth because we are in the middle of the country. And they recognize that Russia and China, the best way that they can hack into our systems and spy on us is from our coastlines and from populated areas. They use ships and subs and populated areas to hide their nefarious activities. And we have, for the last 10 years, been moving things to the middle of our country to protect it so we could keep it safer from hacking and spying operations. And Ellsworth was chosen because most of our threats that we're going to have to respond to are going to be over the North Pole. And so it is important that we recognize that we are the heart of protecting this country and being free. And Ellsworth is important. So the fact that our legislature passed that bill this year to make sure that China can't buy up the land next to Ellsworth, critically important. And it's not just China I have a problem with. I have a problem with Venezuela and Cuba and North Korea and Iran. So there's 6 countries in there that have always been our enemies, they always will be, and they would never let us come to their country and buy land. Why would we let them come to our country and buy our land? So that bill was incredibly important to me as well to make sure that we got passed. One last thing that I'll touch on, and then I'll let legislators and you bring up a few other bills that you care about as well. One was an anti-Semitism bill that we passed and signed into law that just said what happened on October 7th was terrible, and that we know what anti-Semitism is, and it defines it in South Dakota statute so that when there are hate crimes performed into the state, that we now can know exactly what they are and we can go to court and make sure that they don't happen anymore and people are punished for what they do. I think it's important that we stand with Israel. They're an incredible ally of our country. Hamas is a terrorist organization. Anybody who supports Hamas, they support people who hate America. They call us Big Satan. And so it is very important that we as a state stand to ensure that hate crime has no place here in South Dakota. And it has been interesting to me because since we signed that bill into law, South Dakota has been overwhelmed by people threatening us and death threats because we are standing with Israel. So you in this state, because you voted for that bill, you legislators, and it is like the Kraken has unleashed in this country because we were bold enough to take action to say we don't let hate crimes happen. And because we stand against terrorist organizations. And we are all going to make sure, and we've got dozens of other states now taking that bill and using it in their states to make sure that we're doing that and proliferating that kind of support of an ally across the country. And I think that's a powerful place for us to be. We've had just a little bit of discussion, I don't know, this session on pipelines. I don't know if you guys heard a little bit about it. There was some discussion on pipelines and economic development and things like that. What I will say to you is I'd love to take your questions on those. But for the first time in the country, we have a landowner bill of rights that was signed into law. And I don't even think you guys know that that happened. So this landowner bill of rights gives landowners protections that no other landowners have in any other states. You know that I'm a private property owner rights person. The lieutenant governor is, so much so to the level that he's pretty ornery most of the time, just because of how he wants to make sure that he has control over his land and what he can do with it. And we have protections in statute now that gives a landowner bill of rights in place that as we do economic development, it's going to be much more transparent than it's ever been before in South Dakota. Many more public hearings and processes and for people to weigh in. There were no bills on eminent domain, but we also have protections now for landowners that we've never had before, and I think that that's a wonderful thing. We have recently just done some big economic development projects in the state that have to do with ag processing. And there's one in this area. We also have gotten on the radar of Site Selector, which is an organization that decides where new manufacturing plants go or where new businesses go, maybe even where new companies want to move their corporate headquarters, such as banks or franchises or whatever it is, that now South Dakota is the #1 state where they want to look to put those jobs. And it's important to have those kinds of jobs because if you want a balanced economy, you want to make sure that you have a balanced economy that doesn't just overwhelm our roads and bridges with trucks and manufacturing. You want to have engineers, you want to have science, you want to have researchers, you want to have high-paying jobs as well, so that we have people that can work remotely or on computer or data or cybersecurity that balance it out so that we still have the quality of life that we like in South Dakota, but we also can have an opportunity for our kids and our grandkids to stay here and make the kind of money and the jobs that they want and not have to move far away. So that was critically important to me that we do that. And I see I've got a waving hand at the back of the room of somebody who doesn't talk very much, but boy, is it good to see you. Yes, sir, Greg.
I want to compliment everybody that signed that 1022, that phonics bill.
Yes.
I would like you to give Mark DeVries and Belvedere. Larry, you probably remember his mother or his grandmother, Velma.
Okay.
Velma would walk the aisles of the Capitol for phonics for year after year after year. We had Democrats, Republicans carrying that bill, and finally you guys got it passed. And if you could explain that a little bit, the science, but please save a pen for the family.
I will do that. Velma deserves it. Is Velma still with us?
No, she died in 11.
Okay.
And then I just have 2 easy questions. And if you want to address them on the pipeline, those property rights, we still took away some property rights on that with that pipe, correct? And then the second question is the Chinese ownership, not just of Agland, but of Smithfield. And then Tony Van Huysen made the top 10 in the...
Well, you have a lot of questions.
That's not a
so
question.
we should, let's
he made
start...
the top 10 in the Lochek's chief of staff list, so I just wanted
He
to...
did? So let's have Secretary Graves come up here and address the phonics, if you will.
And what the science means.
Yes, because I think he does it extremely well and concise.
I just want to thank you for that phonics
Absolutely.
bill. That's a wonderful thing you did.
And then Ryan, I'll have you come up and run through the landowner bill of rights just succinctly so they know exactly what each element was that was in there. Why don't you just come stand by me?
Thank you. Yes, the bill basically is allocating $8 million to provide training. I'm sorry, $6 million. I'm getting greedy this morning. $6 million.
I think I was going to find $2 more million.
To provide professional development to all of our teachers, K through 5, in South Dakota, in the science, what's called the science of reading. But what it really is phonics. So it has 5 components: phonemic awareness, which is being able to identify that a letter makes a sound; phonics, which is which sounds do they make; and then fluency, comprehension, and vocabulary. So what we've noticed is, or what the researchers have noticed over the years, is that when you adopt an approach like that, when you have a team effort, when the teachers are all trained in this effort, you're going to have much higher proficiency rates in reading coming out of that, dramatically improved. In fact, Mississippi took this on a number of years ago. They moved from, I may have the numbers wrong, but they moved from basically last in the country on their reading proficiencies to right around 17th. That's just an enormous increase compared to all the other states. We're expecting to see that kind of increase in South Dakota over the years. It's going to take us some time to get there. And also, this training is voluntary. So what we're doing is we're providing the training to the teachers. We're going to have to get the districts behind this as well.
And I think what's important about the amount of money that we're using is that so that not only can we give teachers access to that right now that are currently teaching, but we also can cooperate with the Board of Regents to make sure that those students that are being trained right now will have the ability to have that training while they're getting their degree and are able to do that. And we also have an incredible apprenticeship program that's going on right now for teachers And it may be people who are paraprofessionals working in classrooms in districts across the state of South Dakota that for years have been teachers' aides or have been passionate about working with kids, but they never dreamed they'd have the chance to get their own certificate or that they get their own classroom, that now we're training them in the classroom to get their own teaching certificate so that they can be a teacher, and they never have to quit their job and go back to school. They can continue to work and earn a wage, never leave their school district, get their certification, and then get their own classroom and help meet our teacher shortage, and it's a phenomenal thing. And we did last year almost universal licensing. That went a long ways towards recruiting people to fill some of these high-need jobs, but we also recognize we've got people in small districts that may be in Faith, South Dakota, that may be somebody who's 30 to 40 years old that's working in the classroom that thought, I'd like to be a teacher, but I don't have time to quit and move and go to college and get a degree. But we can now train them while they're in that classroom working with our kids and get them their certificate, and they get their own classroom and stay right in their community. And that's an amazing thing that we have been doing that is going to be a fantastic gift to our school districts. So Brian will run through the Landowner Bill of Rights and some of the bills. There was 3 or 4 different bills that touched on economic development in the state, and this one has the Landowner Bill of Rights, which I think is going to be very helpful to us to make sure that when we're doing projects, we're doing them wisely, and that landowners are being treated much more fairly than they have been in the past by some of the companies that we've been dealing with.
Thank you, Governor. My name is Brian Bruner. I'm the Senior Policy Advisor for the Governor. Appreciate. Yeah, I used to be the Commissioner of School and Public Lands for the state, so I know some of you. And in that role, I worked with Dakota Access, Keystone XL, which was never built, but worked on some of these large pipeline projects. And so some of the things in the Landowner Bill of Rights, very excited about some of those things. Things like survey access, paying $500 for initial survey access. We haven't had that before. When we had companies come on, they'd have a right to come survey so they could apply for their PUC permit, but there wasn't any compensation. And so one of the things about having access to your property is receiving compensation. And so there were 3 different bills that really dealt with carbon pipelines or linear projects. It wasn't just carbon, it was electric transmission, oil pipelines, natural gas pipelines. And one of the main things that I was really excited about was the survey access, having seen how that worked before. There's also a $1 per foot surcharge that will go to local counties, and so $1 per foot across the state will be about $3.6 million, and half of that will have to go to the impacted landowners for property tax relief, and the other half goes to the county, which helps keep property taxes low. Other factors in there, landowner indemnification. There's a lot of discussion and things you see online about not being able to get insurance or insurance coverage if you have any of these projects on your property. And so we help put that in the code and codify that protection. Mortgage protection, when you have a pipeline, if they're getting financing and getting a mortgage, that should not impact the landowner. Disclosure of the dispersion models was a big topic, and making sure that some of that information is public. Minimum depth, going to 4 foot instead of the PHMSA required 3 foot for extra protection, especially if you're in a muddy field, and I've driven tractors through some pretty muddy situations, and you can sink down a little bit. So having an extra foot of depth, not just for the freeze thaw, but just for being able to farm your field, is important. Land surveyors being from South Dakota, so that they've got a connection to folks in the state. Another important one, having the easements be written. Seems self-explanatory, but I'll tell you from having been in school and public lands, sometimes those basic things don't always get taken care of. The governor actually signed 2 land patents earlier today for the current commissioner from people who bought land in the 70s and had never turned in their contracts to get their deed. And so there's always real estate transactions. When you see the old Western movies and somebody loses their deed in the poker game, it's because their deed's in their pocket and not at the courthouse. And so having easements be written is more important than I think a lot of people even realize, and having that in code. Very similar to what we have in wind and solar. So there's a lot of things for indemnification of landowners that are really important in those bills, as well as the surcharge, and then streamlining that PUC process so that there's a transparent process for determining those setbacks. And so 3 different bills, but some really good things that were included.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, my name's Michael Boyle. I'm a pastor, and I really appreciate a lot of what you say about wanting to protect personal property rights, and I've always kind of followed your I kind of feel like you say, hey, we need to protect our people in South Dakota, we need to protect our land. And that for me is why SB 201 just seems like a total opposite of what you've stood for.
Huh.
You know, it takes away the ability of the people to protect their land. It takes away individual responsibility.
How does it do that?
Well, it takes away local control in that the
So
PUC,
the county commission process will stay in place.
Right,
They will
but
still be able to
PUC
do that, and then the PUC will also have hearings and testimony, and they're a quasi-judicial body that has to go through it with that kind of an integrity that a court system would, taking information and going forward to do that. But when you're dealing with projects that cross many, many states, many, many counties, having a unified process is incredibly important. So by allowing the county to still say, do the fact gathering, still here, take the hearing and do that, and those at the local level can still come to the PUC process is very powerful. No other state has that.
we already did that. So why are we going back and changing the laws because we didn't like the outcome? And now we're forcing the PUC to make decisions that they didn't have to make before in order for the interested parties to go to court and overrule the PUC.
Well, you always have the option to go to court if you want to.
Right,
I
but
mean, you still have that ability to do that, but we're not forcing them to do it over. What we're saying is
we
that
already had the process, and the process went through, and they were denied. And so we're changing the process, we're changing what they can do and what the PUC is required to do in order to usurp local control, private property rights. And the other thing is you know, this whole carbon capture pipeline is really a product of the Green New Deal. And that's what we're inviting to South Dakota.
Well, here's the deal. I mean, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not a super big fan of we all know how bad I hate the Green New Deal. And carbon pipelines, I may be for them, against them, whatever, I don't really care. What I care is that it's a fair process and that we have an opportunity to participate in economic development that goes forward, that this is something that our ethanol plants, our farmers and our landowners and that people here in South Dakota have an opportunity to participate in if they weigh in and they make their voices heard. That's one of the things that I don't think people understand in this state yet, maybe because you see it in other states, that you maybe think that that's how I operate. I am your governor. And let me tell you what I am. I campaign on who I am and what I believe I am. And I get elected into a position and I ask for you all to support me. And then I make my decisions based on who I told you that I am. But I don't get to be a dictator. And I don't get to go in and decide and overrule everything that the people think. And that's what happens during legislative session, is that these legislators are all set to appear to represent their districts and to have debate and to take in facts and information and to have that presented. And then they give me a bill that I look at if it's constitutional or not. So I don't get to go in there, and there's been a lot of signs around the state, there's been a lot of advertising around the state, a lot of people say, governor's got to do something. Well, you know what, guess what? I'm not Xi Jinping, and I'm not a dictator, and I'm not somebody who's going to come in and say, you know what, the Constitution doesn't matter, I'm going to force my will on people. I don't have a role in this process at all as governor.
You can veto it.
It's already signed into law, because it wasn't done to constitutional. And the people voted for it, and they voted overwhelmingly based on the hearings and the committees that they have. What I would tell you is I would go forward and to look at that bill and look at what it does for landowners. And I know you have concerns about it, but then bring back recommendations that we can change it, that can make it better. I'm always open, and my door is always open. I'd love to have a meeting with you and say, tell me what your concerns are and what we can do next year during session to help give you some more reassurance that you really feel like this is going to protect landowners and their ability to do on their land what they're hoping to do. I'll commit that to you and that we do that. Does that sound like a plan?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, sir. And keep praying. Yes, Ted.
Ted Christensen. Yeah. My concern is this. What can we do to extend the term limits of governors so we can keep you?
Well, I'm really glad I called on you. You showed really good instincts. No, thank you. You've got lots of wonderful leaders in this state. That somebody's going to make you a great governor. Yes.
I'm Grace. I'm one of the two. We were talking about you in our history class.
Uh-oh.
Some questions.
Sure.
So I love your future goals for our education. What is your administration's next step? And then do you have any comments on whether or not you plan on being vice president?
So I'm super, super grieved at the fact that I haven't made more progress with our tribal reservations and education opportunities in our reservations. When I ran for governor, I ran on the fact that I wanted one tribe to take a chance and to partner with me as governor in a way that no other tribe has before. Just sign memorandums of agreement with me, sign law enforcement agreements with me. I will honor your tribal sovereignty. I will come into tribal lands and just enforce tribal law. Let me help make your schools better. Because we've got really, Secretary Graves, what's our graduation rate in our tribal schools? Below 50%. Attendance rate is below 50%, I believe, or close, right above it. Like 1 out of every 2 days they go to school. And most of the time it's because of lack of parental involvement. So for me, my next step would be to what can I do to get a tribe to participate with me to help their kids be more successful? Because they live with 80 to 90% unemployment. Their kids don't have any hope. They don't have parents who show up and help them. They have a tribal council or a president who has a political agenda more than they care about actually helping somebody's life get better. And I've got a few tribes that are doing things like that with me now. So I'm going to continue to do that, and that's where my focus is, and give them more options and more opportunities. Because out of the top 11 poorest counties in this nation, Ian's going to fact check me on this because it was true 2 years ago. I don't know if it's still true. The top poorest 11 counties in the nation, we had 5 of them in South Dakota, and they were on our tribal grounds, which means I'm only as good and doing as good a job as the kids that are suffering the most in my state. I mean, I've got a lot of rock star kids in school districts, but I also have tribal councils that are standing in my way. That absolutely, because they've got control and they got money going into their pockets and they're doing well and they're taking from their people and their communities, they're not benefiting their kids. So that's my next agenda, is to see what I can do to break through that and hug them so much and love them so much that they're going to let me in the door and let me help them help their kids. The other question you was on Vice President. I don't know. You know, my answer used to be that President Trump and I had never talked about it. We have talked about it. What I have told him is that I will just do whatever it takes for me to help him win. All I know is that when he was in the White House, whether you like him or you don't like him, I was on offense. As governor, I got to get up every single day and solve problems. Yeah, I would call him and I would say, your EPA sucks and they're punishing our businesses, and I've got a gravel pit operator over here with a frayed electrical cord and OSHA's fining him $35,000 because he's got a frayed electrical cord. Give me a freaking break. The guy's gonna go broke, and President Trump would help me fix that and say, let him replace his electrical cord and let's reduce the fine to $250. As soon as Joe Biden got in the White House, I went on defense. I spend more time suing the federal government now for overstepping and for trying to take away my rights to protect you than I should be. So I just want him to win, because it's clear that it's going to be a race between Joe Biden and Donald Trump, and I'll just do what I can to help him win. I'd rather stay with all of you though if you'll keep me, because this is my favorite job. I love this job, and you guys are wonderful, and I just bought a new horse, and I'm really hoping that I get the chance to ride him once in a while. So
if you are chosen, do you have a plan to...
I did not know you were here. So like, this guy should have told me that you were in the room the whole time. Yes.
This will be an easy one.
Oh, really? Okay, I'm looking forward to this article.
Is there a plan, if you are chosen to be on the ticket, to sort of formally delegate operation or responsibility to the lieutenant governor for day-to-day operations, or how does that work?
If I'm nominated, I still get to be governor. So you keep me until I'm not governor anymore.
But as far as who's going to be
one thing that people will tell you is that I don't sleep very well. So the lieutenant governor is my partner, and he helps me with a lot of stuff. But I will still be the governor, and I will still be making the decisions.
Governor, we got time for one more.
Probably not from you. You got 2 or 3, so is it okay if I do it one? I'm teasing you today. I'm sorry. I'm picking on you. Yes, back here.
My name's Lyle Miller. I'm a first-generation graduate of UW.
You are. Wonderful. I've got nephews that are going to school there.
I did my professional semester here in Mitchell High School under Sherry Ramsdell.
Yeah.
And I taught school for 20 years at a tribal school, Fort Creek Tribal School. And mostly, you know, the things that you were saying up there, the tribal people, is a lot of it's true because they're dealing with trying to secure their identity. That was taken away. There's a history here between the United States government and a lot of the people and other tribes in the Northern Plains. So, you know, they're struggling to understand American education. But it's hard to understand something that isn't very inclusive of who you are, who your identity is. So that's what the struggle is all about with young people and securing that identity, because everybody here knows that underneath America there was many tribal nations that lived here. And there was community, there was culture, there's a history here. And I really believe that should be included.
Well, sir, one thing I'll tell you is that is why I have over and over again told our tribal leaders that I want to respect your sovereignty, and that and that I will do that, and I will only come in and do what you give me permission to do. And we have changed our standards on what we teach in our public schools to have 4 times more references and cultural references than what there was before I was governor, which means there's much more Native American culture and language and history and true history of the horrific things that have happened in this state and across this country to our Native American communities that will be taught now because of how we've changed those standards than what was being taught before. And my problem is that I don't have control over all the schools that are on tribal grounds. There's BIE schools, which are run by the federal government. There's some private schools, but there's some K-12 schools. And we have one tribe that has a technical education school too, which obviously focuses on skill sets. But I think you and I are sharing the same heart in a good way, that we understand that is the problem, that you want them to know that that their culture is going to be honored and that their sovereignty is going to be honored, but they still have to learn, read, write, do arithmetic in order to go forward and to be able to have a future, to have a job and be successful and to provide for their families.
Currently, I'm working on a book that's going to include a lot of this.
Good.
And I'm wondering if you're going to get kicked out of the libraries.
I doubt it. Why don't you? Every school makes the decision what's in their library. So, you know, what happens a lot in libraries and in school districts is that curriculum companies, and Secretary Graves has educated me on this, curriculum companies will mail free books out to school districts, sending them what they have, and the school and the librarian and all them, most of them decide what gets put on the shelves. And sometimes in South Dakota, there just hasn't been a real vetting process. And we hate to vet books, but sometimes you got pornographic materials that are being put on our school library shelves that I don't believe is appropriate for young little kids. But it's going to be something that the local folks close to the schools are making the decisions on. And but the history that you're talking about, sir, I don't know why anybody would have a problem having that in the library and access to our children.
Because in this story of America, we didn't choose to be the villain.
Do you feel like America has made you the villain? I'm sorry. Sorry for that.
But it's not too late to heal.
And I believe in that wholeheartedly. I'll do it with you, sir. Is this the last question? Was there 2 more questions if they're pretty quick? Go ahead.
I'm one of those people that came from Texas the month before COVID hit.
Oh, good decision.
So they crossed from the border wall to here, and I've enjoyed how South Dakota handled it. I am on this different page than probably other people as far as CO2. And I see CO2, they call CO2 as the greenhouse gas, but it's against greenhouse. But I see CO2 as a benefit for the plants and the trees and everything, because they require CO2 to survive and to live and to thrive. And CO2 has been used in greenhouses for that very purpose.
I think a lot of concern people have had with CO2 in this pipeline project in particular was the pressurized nature of it.
To the carbon capture.
Right.
Where they are taking the CO2. It's such a minuscule amount that is in our atmosphere, and they're dealing with that. But our plants need it. I'm thinking we should tiptoe carefully with CO2 because CO2 is such a benefit to the farmers and to the rangers, because if they don't have it, their grasses are green, they don't grow. They even talked about there when the CO2 levels were up, they were talking about, I read about it, that they were monster vines. Watch out about monster vines because they're really going to grow.
What part of Texas are you from?
Pardon?
What part of Texas did you move from?
I moved from Dallas, Texas.
Oh, did you? Okay,
You might have heard of it.
Yeah, I have.
It's been in the
Yeah,
news.
yeah, a little bit.
But anyhow, I'm glad that I'm here for now. We're taking care of our folks.
We're glad
and
you're here.
I find a bond with you because I was a children's pastor.
Oh, there you go.
A
Wonderful.
retired bus driver, and I have a couple.
Which reminds me, I need to renew my CDL. So thank you. I need to do that. We want Frank to be the last one or Mike? I'm going with Mike. I'm going with Mike, Frank. I'm sorry, you already got a few questions. Okay, thank you. I hope you approve. You approve of that message. Go ahead.
Governor, through your Freedom Works Here campaign, we partnered with GUED
Yes,
on
you
that.
did. Thank you.
We've been giving away $1,000. We recruited 26 families to come to Mitchell.
That's amazing.
Why are we giving them money to come here?
Your community did that. South Dakota didn't, but they did that because they want to help them with moving costs.
Well, we need help too.
Well, then talk to Mike, because he'll help you make that
Yeah, we
happen.
have.
What do you need help with? You mean living, paying your bills, or you need help with?
Why we're paying people $1,000 to come to South Dakota, when most of us, they never paid any of us to come here. We pay taxes and we have a job.
I'm glad you're here. And I'm glad you do, but we had at the time, before we started this marketing campaign, for 2.5 years, all I heard from people in this state was, I would expand my business and I would do better if I had the workers I could hire to fill the open jobs. I need workers. I need
Then
workers.
get them off of the couch and stop paying them all this
Okay, but we broke the record for the lowest unemployment rate in the nation at 1.7%. So more people work in South Dakota than anywhere else in the country. People here do work.
People to come here.
Because we want to make sure that we have enough people here to keep our stores open, our grocery stores open, that we have roads, that we have the ability to have people, that you're not the only one in your county paying property taxes, that there's more people that are taking care of our water treatment plants. And
Before we pay people to come here.
I could help answer
well,
that question.
Mike will chat with you afterwards to find out, but we found when we were chatting with folks, for many people to pick up a family when they're only making $40,000 and they're living in Wisconsin or they're living in Florida or somewhere, that just a little bit of help with moving costs made a world of difference. I'm going to tell you what's surprising about that marketing campaign. We thought people would move here and targeted people from states that we thought would be Wisconsin or Michigan, people that Ohio, that maybe their governors made different decisions and kind of crushed their family business and they didn't know what they were going to do. We knew that people in California hated what was going on, but the number one state people have decided to move to South Dakota because they want to be like us was California. Is number 2 still Florida? I did not think people would.
3 is Texas.
And 3 is Texas. So most people are really worried about a bunch of crazy folks coming and moving in because they're worried that they're maybe going to think different than us. What I love about what's happening is that people that really admire South Dakota and admire our legislators and what they're doing, they're coming here because they want to be like you and they want to make your communities better. Yes?
We have 600 job openings, second lowest unemployment. Where do you see the economy headed?
Where do I see it growing? I think we're going to do great in South Dakota. I honestly thought that by this time, that people might start to forget about us. But we just won the biggest economic development award for Site Selector magazine in the country, that 5 years ago we weren't even on their radar, which means that everybody who's looking to have a business somewhere or looking to go find a job where there is certainty in government, where they know that people aren't going to come in and raise their taxes or punish them with over-regulation, that they know that now the best place to do that is in South Dakota. So those 600 empty jobs, we're going to have an opportunity for people to continue to hear that story and to come and help make sure that that's successful. That's what keeps a classroom from being 10 kids in a classroom to 25 to 30 kids in a classroom, that gives them more opportunities to hear more perspective and diversity and to have the chance to keep our schools thriving as well. All right, I'm going to end it there. Thank you all for coming. I'm going to stick around for a little bit.